Tamaso Majyotirgamaya. Lead me from darkness to light. This perfectly echoes the theme of this faculty development program, where under the tutelage of renowned scholars, we the faculties are exploring multiple avenues of self-upgradation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I, Ms. Gargi Jana, on behalf of the organizing committee, welcome you all to the third day morning session of 1 week online faculty development program on an extremely riveting topic, thriving together, communication, mental wellness, and collaborative excellence in higher education. Organized by School of Applied Science and Humanities in association with IQAC, Haldia Institute of Technology. I welcome our first speaker for today, Professor Bristi, who will enlighten us on a very dynamic and engaging topic, communication strategies for student engagement. Professor Bristi Basu is a professor of English at Rabindra Bharati University, where she has been teaching since 2006. She brings nearly 3 decades of experience in higher education, having begun her academic career at Women's College, Bara Bazar in 1996. Professor Basu received her school education in Northeast India and Delhi. She completed her undergraduate studies in Gujarat, pursued her postgraduate degree in English from Jadavpur University, and earned her PhD from the Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, Hyderabad, with a specialization in 19th century American fiction. Her teaching and research interests span a wide range of literary traditions, including American literature, post-colonial literature, and Indian classical literature. Over the years, she has been actively engaged in teaching, mentoring students, and contributing to the study of English literature through her interdisciplinary and comparative approach. Professor Basu's academic journey, enriched by diverse educational experiences across different regions of India, reflects her commitment to excellence in teaching, scholarship, and the advancement of literary studies. Welcome, ma'am. Please take over the online podium. Over to you.
Thank you, Gargi. Good morning, everyone. That was a very flattering and a long introduction. I'd like to thank Haldia Institute of Technology for extending me this invitation, more so because I get this opportunity to meet all my very young friends. I see some of your DPs, I think that's what it's called. Look, I belong to a period in history which I think is medieval as far as my current colleagues are concerned. So very young friends I'll meet here. So this session or this meeting basically will talk about, I think, recalibrating a little bit rather than knowing something new, because we all teach, we all practice the same craft, art, skill. But the point is that somewhere down the line, maybe we need to think a little bit because times are changing. The other thing that I would like to mention here, just in passing, is that because I've lived across, I think that's what Gargi was trying to say. I mean, that is the reason why all these things were said, that since I've lived across various parts of the country, I have learned to respect difference. I've learned to be part of the periphery for a very long time. I've learned to be careful in trying to position myself vis-a-vis the cultural ambience of the place to which I belong. While I chose to become a teacher. Teacher, I think that's the best way to describe all of us. I realized that in a classroom, the situation has changed a little bit. I've just kind of crossed the floor and come to one side of the room, and I don't think I should be given the right to differentiate myself from the other side, because I'd been there just quite a few years ago. Quite a few in the sense because we had to do our PhD or whatever else, but we had been part of that big group not so long ago. Therefore, I guess communication strategies for student engagement. This is, I think, one of those little areas where we sometimes, off and on, need to recalibrate. Not that we're going to learn anything new, we know all that. And I'm sure you've had sessions where they have talked about, your experts, your resource persons would have talked about difficult situations in classrooms, how to manage classrooms. But this is a little different from that, because we're going to talk about communication, not just managing or transference of knowledge. And then I also add strategies for captivating classrooms and inspiring minds. So it's not just trying to keep them engaged, but also in the process try and see if we can um, inspire students, put ideas which they will work upon on their own. So I think we could begin. Who was the best teacher you ever had? That's how I would like to begin. And I'm sure all our memories go back to that wonderful favorite teacher that we had once upon a time, who made learning memorable because they did things differently. Maybe we can all individually think about how they made things memorable, how they taught us differently, and how is it that they communicated. Was it just reading things out, talking to us about things we didn't understand, or coming down to our level and talking to us in a way as if uh, they participated in this entire process. I think we remember those teachers who were not there just behind a table and sat on a chair and told us things, but also waited for us to be part of that entire process. So our best teachers, our favorite teachers, and uh, currently using a superlative as the best teacher is become and is becoming more and more difficult, because it's not just how best you are, but how you are best. I think that is what uh, communication will help us do. So, and then this is how I'm going to program this, and I hope I will be able to communicate, because this is going to be a challenge for me as much as it is going to be for all of us with our students. So we would like to explore these particular ideas, what student engagement really means, why communication influences learning, and then, of course, very importantly, practical strategies for engaging classrooms, and then the new world, digital communication techniques, in which I am very poor, and my young friends on the other side of the screen will help me a lot more with this and know a lot better than I would even dream of knowing. And then, of course, if we could draw out some action plans for classroom use, practical ways of engaging students, so that um, they can communicate, or we can communicate with each other better. This is not a definition. What is student engagement? I think this was just to put it very short with a question mark so that it draws our attention. So it's a degree to which, how are we engaged intellectually, emotionally, and behaviorally engaged, right? Where students become involved not only intellectually, because it's about the mind, and then, of course, also how they engage emotionally, how they fit into the class, how do they react, do they hold back, do they exchange, do they feel shy, do they feel scared, and then how do they express all that behaviorally. Are they quiet? Do they talk too much? Do they disrupt? And all this is not a blame game. It is basically because sometimes students find themselves, especially very new ones, let's say right from school they had a different system and they come to college. Nowadays, since we have a lot of universities where you have undergraduate courses run in universities, they come away straight from school to a university, and then adjusting to that new alien kind of an environment takes a lot of time. Just as for us on this side of the table, shifting from, let's say, a first year class to a third year class, and please pardon me, I'm still in the year mode, not in the semester mode. So please make slight adjustments. That's a request. So first year, third year, let's say sem 1, sem 6. Now we have 8 semesters, sem 8. And then when we go on to do PG courses, or maybe take research classes, and then shifting, say 10 o'clock one, and then you move on to a PG class, then you come back to a third year class. So for us, again, getting students to engage with us is also a big challenge. So it is not just attendance, it goes beyond attendance. It means participation. And in what way? It's not us or them, it's all of us. We have to create a situation where students want to know. So there is curiosity. So that's one C. And then the other word that I have used, and we shouldn't use jargon, but I really got carried away with this. I wouldn't use it otherwise, but I thought we could use this to make it look a little chic. We call this ownership, and that is like taking responsibility in the process of learning. That's what I mean. And then connection. So do students connect with whatever is going on in the class? So engagement will comprise the desire to know, the taking responsibility for learning, that they want to engage, that they want to know what is going on instead of just passively listening to what is happening. And then, of course, through these, do they connect with the proceedings in a classroom or in any kind of, it's a classroom could also be a digital classroom, or a meeting like this. So do they want to engage? I'm sure you have attended educational programs either as students or teachers during the COVID period. And every day it was a challenge because I am so used to seeing human faces, students, looking at you, talking to you, exchanging or looking away. And suddenly I had this whole screen of little boxes. And there was that song, Little Boxes, that was going on in my mind. It was very difficult adjusting. Now I think, I have kind of reconciled to the fact that this is also a possibility and we can have classes this way. When there is, the best way, of course, is the offline physical presence mode. But in a situation like this where I can meet all of you, which is an advantage, but I wouldn't be able to do it if I went to just one place, because I'm sure you've connected from various parts of the state and also other parts of the country. So this is a big opportunity, yes, but also that there are challenges, and engagement therefore again becomes a big issue here. We move on to the next bit. The changing classroom, the changing scenario. How has it changed? And why has engagement become challenging? So higher education has changed dramatically, and today's classrooms, we were just talking about this, shaped by digital technology, information overload, and that is a big thing because we are bombarded. When I was a student, we were running from pillar to post, library to teachers, trying to get information, books. But now we are bombarded like from all directions with information, and it's very difficult to actually sieve the kind of information that we have and how much of it is useful. Not that all of it is useful. And then we have classrooms where we did in a different way, but now it has changed. Diverse learner backgrounds. Learners come from various backgrounds. So, and then of course, the way students expect that a program that they have registered to or have been admitted to will feed them their expectations out of that program. So a teacher is no longer only about someone who transmits knowledge. So it's not about transmitting. So teaching, therefore, is also sustaining attention. And so that's one. We hold the class attentive so that they don't veer away. Otherwise, communication will not happen. And then also the next step, fostering meaningful participation so that students will participate in whatever is transpiring in the class. It's not that it's not that they come with a preconceived notion, or we from this side of the desk go with a preconceived notion, this is what I'm going to tell them, and come out. But a whole lot of learning on both sides of the table actually happen because of what happens in a classroom. We come with when we do our teacher training, a lot of us have done that. We come with a not a preconceived, but a kind of, in a way, yes, a slightly preconceived plan that this is what I'm going to do. But that particular day, that particular class, one particular question on one particular situation can make you have to recalibrate. That's the word I'd like to use. Maybe not change much, but rearrange a lot of the things that we have to do. Therefore, participation from both sides becomes very, very important. So, how has the classroom changed will also determine the way we adopt communication techniques in a classroom today. If there are things that are niggling you, maybe you can just keep them with you, and then we'll address all that. I'm sure we'll have some time. Oh, by the way, I also have a timer, so I forgot this in my excitement. um, yes, so we are it's 12 past 11, so let's say I'll just knock off the 10 minutes into my time, so I have 20 minutes less than 2 hours, because I think we'll have some time for discussions at the end. I'd love that. Uh, so, who are today's learners? Today's students are more likely to be, yes, digitally connected, which I'm not. So I'm a student who's not digitally connected. There are collaborative learners, visually oriented. They are purpose driven, because now we don't call them courses in the way we used to call them then, or programs. We call them modules, courses, programs, which have changed meaning as we have. I'm sure when you started as students, the way you meant a course is very different from now that you are teachers, the way you want to use the word course. And of course, they are comfortable questioning authority. It was not just sitting in class and absorbing very passively like a sponge whatever our teachers told us, and then we leave our classroom. Now so if you take the teacher to be, or the institution to be an emblem of authority, then students do to get opportunities to ask, because they have so much of information now. It's not that we're telling them something absolutely new, earth-shatteringly new. Maybe they have not seen it in that particular way, but they definitely have information about a whole lot of things than definitely I did, and I'm also sure you did when you were students. And then seeking relevance rather than rote learning. So today's learners want to know why we are doing what we are doing. It's not that they sit and informally used mug up things, rote learn things, and then try to reproduce that. They do want to, because a whole lot of the focus has been on practical things in life now, the way we manage our courses, or the way we program our courses, the way we design our courses. A whole lot of the practical component has been injected into the way we plan things. So therefore, we have to see how we can make things relevant for students, because the students want to know how they're going to gain doing whatever they are doing. The 4 dimensions of student engagement. Let's get a little technical now. So it's actually not a single dimension into how a student engages with a class or a proceeding. So there is a behavioral dimension, there's a cognitive one, and we have seen how students participate in these, or how students get involved in these. So there's a behavioral, there's a cognitive, emotional, and social. So in the behavioral dimension, students will attend and participate and persist trying to learn. And then cognitive, the mental, the cerebral aspect, they're going to think deep and try to solve problems. And the good part of today's or this FDP is that since it's going to be multidisciplinary, I'm sure all my friends on the other side of the screen, my younger colleagues, would be thinking of these particular elements from the perspective of their own particular disciplines. So the way uh, a faculty member of a department of social science or literature would think about cognitive engagement would be very different, or at least quite different, from the way a faculty member who's a part of a technology department or a management department or a department of medicine would like to engage with. So I'm sure here we will have to put our own little individual faculties into use to understand how this engagement would happen between us and our students in a classroom. And then there is emotional engagement, which is uh, the way students would feel interested, feel valued in a classroom, and also connect with whatever is happening. So often we try to therefore make eye contact with our students, or look at them, smile, nod our heads, which they do in return. Of course, sometimes it's very mechanical, but a lot of times looking at them, you realize that maybe things are not going very well, or going very well, or need to be changed. So a whole lot of emotional engagement becomes valid when we try to uh, assess our own performance every day, because teaching is a performance every day in class. So we can evaluate our own performance as we go along in a classroom, looking at the faces of our students, looking at the way they respond to us. And of course, there is a social dimension, which is to collaborate and learn with others. So in a classroom, it's not obviously a single thing. There'll be a whole lot of other friends or participants, students who we know well. For the students, I mean, the classmates that they know well or they don't know very well, but then because they're sitting together on a bench, or in a couple of benches together, or maybe in a classroom, there is a common minimum program that they have, that this is what they're going to adopt or accept. And whenever there is even a slight glitch, they would look at each other and try to um, sort of evaluate for themselves whether it is only them who has not understood or has not engaged, but also others who are having the problem. So if we keep our eyes open and our ears open, and we get to see a lot of these happening in class. Sometimes you have to rephrase the way you are trying to explain a particular concept or a point, because and that helps, because maybe a lot of the words that we have used have not gone parallelly with all the students in class. So effective communication supports, therefore, very naturally, all four dimensions simultaneously, not just one. Therefore, engagement or understanding or evaluating engagement therefore requires that we pay attention or give weightage to all these four dimensions uh, while we work with our students in class. Recognizing, therefore, if with what is engagement, therefore disengagement will have its own characteristics. So looking beyond attendance, so engagement is not just being present in class. Therefore disengagement would be students may be physically present but mentally absent. The class may be full of students, but then what happens? Signs of disengagement, and these are the things that we were just talking about, we could look for: passive note taking, minimal participations, either they're very quiet, distant. You can almost see a screen before their faces. They're not engaging. The eyes look distant. Uh, Passive. I know we have, but it's easier said than done. Maybe in faculty development programs we can talk about these things, but in a real classroom situation where uh, there are a whole lot of students, we know we have very large classes sometimes. Maybe we can just shift our gaze from the front benches towards the end, maybe to the sides, and see how students are responding to us. In that way, what happens is that they also realize that the teacher or facilitator or professor, as whatever way we want to describe ourselves, are concerned about the way we are responding, or are trying to find out how we are responding, and maybe it does generate in some situations this effort to engage with us in class. So let's get back to this. So there is passive note taking, minimal participation, reluctance to ask questions. That's a very, very common thing in class. Reluctance to ask questions. They do not want to ask questions. We keep telling them, have you understood? Do you understand? But that's not what it is. A lot of them will say yes, not because they have, or because um, they're scared, but just because they don't know how to frame a question, because there is a peer group around them, and a whole lot of there's a pressure of how the teacher is going to evaluate them, the pressure of the peer group, maybe a problem with the language, maybe there was a problem in comprehending what had transpired just prior to the doubt that they had. So a lot of students really are reluctant to ask questions. Then surface learning rather than deep learning, and we find that out the moment we have the scripts. So it's something that has just happened on the liminal level, on the level of surface, and then they have not evaluated it, they've not thought about it, they've not engaged with it in any way, but just reproduced it verbatim, word for word, the way it was probably delivered in a classroom. And then, of course, there is a phone. Sometimes they use their phone for a textbook, and then they have a message from their social media, whatever social media they use, and then they're scrolling again. And then after a while, they go back and ask, where were we? So you have a whole lot of digital distractions that happens. And then, of course, declining curiosity. Oh, we already know this. This has already happened. And then maybe we can find that from Google or whatever other source that they have. So keeping students engaged, therefore, is a challenge for a teacher all along. So therefore, attendance in class, physical attendance, which we have to record every day, and it takes quite some time doing those 100 names and putting ticks or P's or whatever it is, or numbers. But ultimately, it's not the number that is present in class, but all the other things that make engagement a challenge for all of us. Let's think about this. Why do students disengage? The student factors. So I've arranged this in three different groups. So there is a student factor, there is a learning environment factor, and there's a teacher factor. The student factor is anxiety, which I think we all have been talking about and thinking about. Lack of confidence. So this lack of confidence is not necessarily cerebral. It could also be because of the new kind of uh, very new exposure that they have had to things. And then their priorities. So their priorities will decide why or why not do they want to disengage or engage, for that matter. So competing priorities. The teacher factors again is one-way communication. You come and just read or lecture and then go away. Or sometimes just ask, have you understood? And then they say, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, and then you go on. So that could be a thing. And then, of course, very little interaction with the students, and most often we cannot blame teachers only for this, because there's a whole lot of ground to cover, space, score, syllabus to cover, and then the classrooms are large and interaction sometimes is not possible. So this is where probably we were talking about recalibration. We'll have to take a little bit of time maybe and think if we could increase the amount of interaction that we have with our students in class. And then, of course, the unclear expectations, we not even from our end, not from the students' end. What is it that we are expected to deliver at the end of it? What are the expectations that we have from our students? So sometimes, in the pressure of delivering the material, we have had not enough time to think about the outcome, expectation, outcome of what we are delivering. What are the desired outcomes of, or what is the desired outcome of what we are delivering? So that is a factor that affects this engagement. And then, of course, the learning environment, large classrooms, yes. A whole lot of noise around, yes. Technology distraction, again. So that's there all the time. And then, of course, examination. Everything is exam oriented. So, therefore, learning and engagement sometimes takes a backseat because students are more um, worried about how they are going to be assessed. Of course, we have tried to do all kinds of things like internal assessment programs or schemes where we allot a bit of the weightage. But remember, even here, we have a weightage. Say, if it's a 50-mark course, then 10 marks for internal assessment. And the internal assessment technically should be continuous internal assessment, not one examination, one project, one assignment. Continuous internal assessment would be, that is what I think the UGC also calls it, or I'm sure all the organizations which control higher education, or direct, not control, but direct higher education, mean is that it should be continuous even when in class. So um, maybe there is a ground here when students know that it's not just one paper which will determine their fate, but also the way they participate in the classroom whenever they get a chance. And I think it's on us to make sure that some chances are there, even though we are under a lot of pressure to deliver. So disengagement, therefore, is rarely caused by one factor alone. It's a combination, and therefore it is so difficult for us to uh, diagnose. Uh, if there is anybody from the medical field, or the field of psychology, psychiatry, medical field, diagnosis, prognosis, and then treatment plan. That's how I think they would like to describe their process. So it's a kind of a combination. So if once we diagnose these, then we can think in terms of a prognosis. Move ahead. Uh, a communication gap. Um, so a communication gap is not uncommon. So I've got a scenario here. Let's look at this. I'll read this. Read this along with me. This is a familiar scenario. Maybe just take a minute and read this, and then I'll shift this here. We'll come to the next slide. So here we are, a familiar scenario, and this is something that happens very often in our classrooms. The teacher explains a concept clearly. Done. No one asks a question. And then, a very common question from the teachers in, is everything clear? Have you understood? And then the response is also predictable, yes ma'am or yes sir. And then the result, the outcome, is that when they take the examination and you get the scripts, or you take their assignments and you read them, evaluate them, we see that even though our students had said, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, we have understood, the results speak otherwise. So, this is a situation that we face very often. So, what could have happened? Right? What could have happened? We move on to think about this. We'll think about this and maybe get a chance to come back. What could have happened before we go on to the next slide? Uh, maybe that our discussion wasn't clear. Maybe the material that we communicated did not interest them. Maybe they were too scared to ask. Maybe the idea was so new, or they were so uninterested in this whole thing, it did not affect them in any way, and they let it be. So that question remains. I think it will keep coming back. So as a case study or as a situation, let's keep that at the back of our mind and we'll come back. So as we go on, what is effective classroom communication, therefore? So we had that when we had a classroom where everybody said yes, we thought it was effective communication, the results spoke otherwise. Therefore we need a way out of this. Let's think in terms of, if we could think about what effective classroom communication could be. So it's not a transmission of information, it is the creation of shared understanding. Shared understanding. So it's not just I have a lesson, whatever discipline I'm trying to. Since I teach English, let's say there's a poem that I'm trying to teach. I paraphrase it for them. I bring out all the elements that occur in it. I talk about all the figures of speech or whatever else is there. I talk about the ideas that the poet is trying to communicate, and then say, okay, fine, have you understood? And they say yes, and then gone, and this is what happened. And then at the end of it, we find that the result is they did not understand the poem. So it was not my transmission of information, which I thought I had done comprehensively, but of course, it is the creation of shared understanding. And who is sharing? It's not just students share, but it is also that the classroom, the teacher, student share with each other the understanding. So the word that I am here looking for is meaning. Has the meaning been communicated? What is it that I had wanted as a teacher? I had wanted to mean, was that received and shared, and did it come back as a shared understanding or a meaning? Maybe the student understood it completely differently. Let me give, let's talk about this line. It's a very common poem that all of us do in school. The line goes like this, just one line. My love is like a red, red rose. My love is like a red, red rose. And we talk about, well, this is a simile, like indicates simile. Love is compared to a rose, a love and red, or rose, red rose indicates love. Therefore, my love is like a red, red rose. But what we have missed out is that the poet did not say my love is like a red rose. What the poet had said, Robert Burns, is that my love is like a red, and it's not a printing error, red, red rose. Why the two R's? Why the two reds? What is it used for? We know it is used for emphasis. Does the poet mean lot of love? Does the poet mean more red? What is the indication that we give? So if we asked our students, they'll say, yes, it is for emphasis. So maybe a group of them would say, lots of love. And then they would say, the redder the rose, the greater the love. And it would stop there and we move on. But then there is a purpose behind using this red, red rose. It's not just the redness or the amount of love. It's also a way of prolonging this redness, which will not get communicated by the line immediately, but will depend on the way the teacher or the facilitator engages, because now we use the word very often, engages with the students in the class. So it's not just purely emphasis, it's not purely the amount or the redness, it's also about what goes beyond. So for the poet, it's like the red rose would remind him of these prolonged, this immeasurable amount of, or this lengthened amount of love that he felt, or the excess amount. So there is a sense of excess, that is the word I was looking for, a sense of excess which cannot be measured. So yes, it is emphasis, yes, it is color, but excess is something that you cannot explain in terms of words unless the students start, remember the emotional quotient, start feeling this. So let's say I would, if I were doing this particular poem in class, I would say, how do I define excess? What is excess? 100,000 million? We can't say that. So my example would be, let's have a glass, and I feel that this glass contains as much amount of love that I want it to contain. So I keep filling it with love. So the glass reaches the love reaches the brim, the edge, the top edge of the glass. And then I put in a little more of love. And then it wobbles on the surface. And then I put a little more and it overflows. The moment it overflows, that overflowing is not measured. Whether it is a drop or whether it is a glass load, whether it is an ocean full, excess is excess. So that red rose is the point of excess. So if we could explain to our students and hope that that explanation was meaningful to them as it was meaningful to us, we can only evaluate it when they come back to us with similar instances or examples. Or they say, oh ma'am, or oh sir, yes, when we were talking about the red rose, this is what you had said. I think we can apply this. Then you know that communication was achieved. And they have actually engaged cerebrally, cognitively, and used that, thought deeply, and used it in other contexts. So let's get back to this. What is effective classroom communication? Is not transmission of information, it is the creation of shared understanding. So they share back with us. Effective classroom communication is clear, it is interactive, and of course respectful. That's very important. Respectful. We all come from different backgrounds, different places, we have had different trainings, and that is how I think I started talking with all of us, is that I have learned to respect difference, because I have known what it is to be different, to be someone who was not like everybody else, because I kept traveling from one place to the other, change schools, change college, change universities, did all kinds of things as I grew up. So therefore being respectful as a teacher is very important, because all our students, and it's I think a commerce word that we use, are stakeholders in this entire process. So because my colleagues are young, my students are young, I do not have the liberty to forget respect. And then of course, whether it is purposeful, what purpose does it serve? So if the proceedings of the classroom is purposeful, and then responsive. So an effective classroom communication would be responsive, that you would get response from the students as much as the teacher would respond to the queries that they have, thereby ensuring that some kind of communication initially would have happened, which would get strengthened the more interactive it gets. So the initial stage of communication is something that you get maybe from the body language that they have, and once they start talking back or talking amongst themselves, if we give them a chance and then they give us a feedback, we know that the classroom communication has been effective. Therefore, learning begins when communication becomes a dialogue rather than the teacher lecturing the students. So, uh, and this is nothing new. We know that. We've all sat in our classes and we know how restless we would get when there were questions and we were not getting an opportunity to ask if we had a clarification or a doubt or a question. So let's do this, the cycle. And I didn't know how to do the cycle, therefore I've left it this way. We've titled this the communication cycle. So it's a continuous process from the teacher to the message to the student to the engagement, the interpretation, and then the feedback. Therefore, we know from our feedback that the communication is happening. And then the teacher adjusts communication. Therefore, once we reach a process of teacher, message, student, and then interpretation, until there we wait, communication we know would have happened if there is a feedback. If there is no feedback, we have to adjust it. We have to adjust the communication. Maybe re-articulate it differently, maybe give cues for them to respond to, maybe ask questions differently, maybe ask them to give us ask the students to give us examples, maybe ask them to talk about their own experiences in life, anything that is related to the message that we were trying to communicate with them. So until that feedback happens, communication will remain incomplete. It's a class, it has happened, we've spoken for an hour like I am doing right now. Unless we get our feedback, we don't know what we have communicated. We get hints, but the satisfaction or the cycle comes full, the communication cycle comes full if and only if we get a feedback. And I'm not saying that we get a complete feedback and it's all done and the boxes are ticked. Sometimes we will have to make slight changes because we realize in a classroom where there are students, various individuals who form the body have understood it maybe in their own different fashions. But there was a message that we were communicating. There is a scope for difference, but it cannot be so varied that all of it can be accommodated. I'm not saying allowed, accommodated in that particular message. So we need to make a bit of adjustments here and there, not much maybe. And if it is very varied, then I think we need to think about it ourselves and re-articulate it in a different manner. The message then has not been communicated. Therefore, we might need to reframe maybe the message a little bit. Therefore, we were talking about the communication cycle and we were talking about the slight readjustments that we need to make sometimes in order to ensure, and this is what the buzzword is, that communication has happened. Communication has taken place. It's just not a transfer of information, a transfer of, to make it a little higher, transfer of knowledge, but communication has happened. That both sides of that equation have reached some kind of an exchange that has happened, and only then do we know that the process is complete. We'll move on. So, what are the barriers to effective communication? So, again, here there are two sides to this. One is teacher related, and the other is student related. So, common barriers are, one, the teacher related ones are information overload, and we can't help it. We have a course, especially in the in the semester system. We have a whole lot of information to pass on, and we are always in a hurry because they're credit hours and these are things that we have to mention. Then the other thing that we need to sometimes communicate, especially to students, young students, is jargon, things which are very specific, very niched kind of words. So we have to do away with jargon and try and do away with excessive jargon. Sometimes we cannot do away, they're there. I mean, not that all jargon is bad. So if you recollect, I had used the word ownership instead of taking responsibility because I had to come to this jargon. Ownership is a term that is used in communication, right? And taking responsibility is good, but not good enough to explain the concept ownership. I can gloss the word ownership by saying taking responsibility, but I cannot do away with the word ownership at all. So I'm sure from all our disciplines, we have come to situations where we couldn't do away with certain words, right? Um, Literature person, let's use a word that we use in our Indian languages, obhiman or abhiman, if we say in Hindi. How do you translate that into English? There is, then it is jargon because it's something that is very so typical of a language structure that we have, right? It's almost like a jargon. I'm not saying it is, but the thing is, it's untranslatable sometimes, and we use this. Jargon is definitely used with a negative, pejorative sense all the time, but sometimes you just cannot do away with it. Therefore, the best way here, and we can offer solutions right away, is to actually draw instances which could be related, which are relatable instances, and explain the term, and then plant that or impose that back onto the message that we were doing. Right? So I remember, I mean, this is something that happens from getting gray hair. I had to teach a poem by Matthew Arnold, Dover Beach. And there was this section about the withdrawing, the ever the ever ebb and flow of the ocean. And then this was a very seminal part of that particular poem. So my young kids, I had to get something to them which was interesting, and because the poem is very heavy, Dover Beach is a heavy poem. So I said, let's think about this Kishore Kumar song. लहरों की तरह यादें दिल से टकराती है तूफान उठाती. And everybody, I mean, that song was made long before they were ever born. And yet they kind of, engaged straight away. Yes, 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 we remember the song. And then some of them even hummed this. So I had to put their enthusiasm down and said, okay, we'll hum this later as soon as the class is over. But a whole lot of them actually knew the song. And because a whole lot of them knew the song, the ones who didn't, it's quite possible. What was the song? So I had to risk this so that the class could participate and yet not, take away on another tour, take a detour and go on to the song. So I said, let's come back and we'll sing the song together and maybe watch whatever, that clip. So that's how, we could actually try to reduce the negative vibes of jargon. And then monotonous delivery. Okay, once upon a time there was Jack and he went up with Jill. I mean, oh please, I mean, the best thing that we can do not to put the students to sleep is to make sure that our voice does not sound like a washing machine, the buzzes of it. We'll come to that. When we talk about how to go about it, we were just talking about the barriers. So monotonous delivery and lack of interaction. I look at the neon light which is right in front of me and I talk and I don't look at my students at all. Right now, I can't see any of you, my friends, my colleagues, but you can see me, right? So even in this digital mode, you can see me. I've left the camera on. If I switched it off and I kept talking endlessly, it would be, I hope it is not a monotonous delivery now. I'm just taking things for granted. Maybe it is. I would expect a feedback at the end of the workshop. but of the session, but lack of interaction. And then, of course, student related ones are anxiety, fear of judgment. These are very common things in class. Limited confidence, and of course, digital distraction. So we have to keep in mind how to overcome these, right? Keep reassuring them it's all right. I mean, we're doing things new just as you are new. I'm also new with you. And this is a very valid uh, defense that we have as teachers. Every batch of student is a new batch. So just as they are adjusting to us, we are also adjusting to our students. Even if the batch is a sixth sem batch, the clever thing for us is to as teachers is to communicate that, look, we I knew in fifth semester, in the fifth semester this is what I taught. In the sixth semester the program has changed, therefore the situation has changed. Maybe you and I per se have not changed, but the environment has changed, so we need to readjust. So therefore it is okay if there are problems. It's nothing embarrassing, right? Both ways I think we have to keep adjusting to ensure that there is effective communication, because these are the barriers that prevent communication from happening. uh, Go on to the other one, the next one. So therefore our role, teacher as a communicator. And I liked doing this. So what kind of teachers do students remember? Teachers who explain clearly, listen patiently, encourage participation, not a cackle, but participation. That again is a management lesson that we learn. They participate so much that the whole class is hijacked into something totally different. That doesn't happen because the clock keeps ticking and we have to do our module or syllabus or whatever. And then respect different viewpoints. This is, I think this is the bedrock. This is the bedrock for any communication to happen. I mean, it's listed at 1, 2, 3, 4, but I think if I could do a what do I call it? A watermark on this slide, I would put respect different viewpoints. That remains all the time. It's valid now. It was valid earlier. It's going to remain valid forever. And then inspire confidence. Right? They may forget the lecture, but they really forget how a teacher made them feel. They carry it, whether it is positive or negative. They carry it. Many of our students will become teachers later on. If we have been a bad teacher, we have also taught them how not to become like us. If we have been a good teacher, a good communicator, they will get inspired by the way we have communicated with them. So I as I grew older, I realized that for every session, every class, which was a performance, every class for us is a performance, I had to make slight adjustments. Every time the arrangement of the class was different. You usually find students sitting in particular places for one entire semester, but sometimes that does not happen. Students come in late and they don't find their favorite place and they go elsewhere. And then the contour of the class is changed. The people who usually respond have a different position today than they had earlier. And then you have to make sure that now that students have different places, the attention does not remain riveted to only the students who respond, but is equally spread through the classroom. So that is a very important, I think, tip that we can share. That each student feels that he or she is part of a classroom, that they're not being ignored. It's very, very important. The way we communicate. We ask questions. We ask them any clarifications, they'll say no, ma'am. But then you can always pick up a section and say, could you do this differently from the way I have done it? And then you realize whether they had heard what you had said, the way you had said it, in order to respond to it differently. No, the continuous internal assessment that I was talking about a few minutes back. So I think It's not only assessing them, it's also assessing us, that they understood, absorbed what we have said, and are thinking of the, it's been worthwhile for them to think of it differently. Otherwise, they just keep quiet. Now, our only tool, sometimes the best tool ever, the voice, our voice, the most powerful teaching technology. And a lot of us will have to go to doctors and ask them for remedies because we've been shouting for the last 30 years. I have a large class, and then we don't have public address sometimes. Very often we don't, and then you shout and you lose it. But your voice, the voice communicates. It's not how mellifluous your voice sounds, but the way you modulate the voice. And that is an art that or a craft. It's not an art, it's a craft that we pick up as we go along. We pick up as we go along. The older you get, the better you get. And if you had an experience of sharing a stage and a performance, you know exactly how to do it. So uh, your voice communicates more than your words. Use your voice intentionally through pace. So it can't be the same pace all through. Volume, tone, pause. Pause is, even though it comes last, is very, very important. Pause. First of all, to catch your own breath technically, and also give space for the students to process what has been happening mentally, give them space to think, maybe formulate a question or a clarification that they seek or a doubt that they have, and come back to you. So slow pace, slow it down for ideas which are complex. Sometimes we do that when we do different difficult words. We break them down into syllables, and it's easier for our little kids to, especially first year students, sometimes don't know these words. They would get used to it. And then emphasis, volume. You raise your volume when you want to emphasize. You raise your volume to reach out to somebody. You raise your volume to show emotion. Then tone, the fall and the rise of the voice to show enthusiasm or empathy. And then, of course, pause. And as you read that last line, a pause is often more powerful than another sentence. You're waiting for them. I'm waiting. Come up, let's catch up, and then we talk. Sometimes when there's a disruption and we don't know how to handle this because it's completely unwarranted, we pause, and the message gets across very soon, very clearly. Right? Sometimes when students walk into class late, either we allow them or we don't. When we do, we still pause for them to note that they're late sometime. If it's an emergency and they have to come in, or maybe they were caught in the rain or something, we give them the time. Pause. We pause. So the pause can be used in very many ways. Um, Sometimes as encouragement, sometimes as empathy, sometimes as warning. So we use silence or a pause to make ensure that communication is happening. Right. Non-verbal communication. In a large classroom, this becomes very, very important because you can't, as a teacher, uh, plan to communicate with each individual student and find out if they have understood. So when we are panning the class with our eyes, we also engage, we have eye contact, we read facial expressions, we read gestures, movements if they're fidgety, and classroom positioning, right? Both for us and for the students. When they're not on and they're trying to take a call in the class, like they'll hide behind somebody, crouch. So we know something is happening. Um, it's good sometimes when we address a big class, we can just stand up, sit down, maybe walk the aisle if we can. It keeps attention or the focus on the proceedings. I'm not saying it keeps attention riveted, but it keeps the attention focused on the proceedings of the class, because uh, I'm not saying we run around, because then it's going to be a distraction, but make slight movements up and down, so that if it was getting monotonous, or if they were trying to snooze off, or if they were students were finding it very uninteresting for whatever reason, or had other concerns, it would promptly bring them back. That is why people move on stage sometimes. It's not just sit and deliver dialogues. We move on stage so that the focus remains on the performance, quote unquote, the performance that we are putting up. So
Yeah,
get back.
yeah,
So
okay.
non-verbal language, or non-verbal communication. Um, I'll give you a personal anecdote. When I started teaching, I what 3 years after my MA, yeah. So I walk into this college. This is huge, big college. I mean, literally huge. And here I am, 5 feet nothing. Uh, First day, and I had to go to class. So I held my register like this to show that I was this teacher. And I kind of, kept saying, excuse me. And of course, my students, boys, were much taller than I was, and they were busy chatting. And here was this compulsory English class, my first class. And when I went to the classroom, which was a huge big hall, uh, from the days, after a while, I could just see a haze of semicircles. I couldn't see any faces. It was that large. And the lights were coming from behind, so the faces were in darkness. And then I realized that my hands were shaking and my knees were also shaking. Right? I'm 5 feet nothing. If I sit down, my students don't see me. And if I stand up, they realize that I'm scared. And it's this huge, big classroom, the entire college, compulsory English. Therefore, I had to lean on the table, and then the table, of course, squeaked or whatever it screeched. But then the point is, after a while, I realized I was kind of gripping the edges of the table, trying to talk to them. Right? My knuckles were going white because I was, or whatever, light, because I was gripping onto the sides of the table because I was so scared. Now that was a very clear indication to my students. They were just far too kind not to rag me on this later. But one of my colleagues told me that give yourself a couple of days and it'll be fine. And and it was a kind of, I had to make a bilingual attempt at teaching English, which really got me because I didn't know how to teach English in any other language but English. But it was a compulsory English class, and I was told that make it bilingual so that students engage. That's why I gave you the story. Students engage, right? So sometimes, even though it is not part of my bond, I do have to veer away. Maybe use non-verbal communication, maybe use verbal communication, maybe shift, but not too much, of course, not too much, because I have to keep control over the medium which I'm using. But sometimes, I mean, I just remembered that looking at the slide, we do have to make concessions, so that those of our kids who are not on the same page as we are don't feel left out, and they're kind of lagging behind, because if that feeling sets in, it really sinks us, because we've all gone through that, right? When I Hindi is not my mother tongue. Now I speak Hindi. I can actually communicate in Delhi in Hindi, so I know that kind of Hindi. But initially, I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't write, I couldn't read. The Hindi I knew was from Kolkata, which didn't work in Delhi. But my teachers understood, right? And they made sure they only spoke to me in Hindi outside classroom, my Hindi teachers. So that, after a while, I knew the difference between the aap and the tum and the whatever else. And aap also meant not just you, but plural in that way. So what I'm trying to, by giving you these little anecdotes, what I'm trying to say is we have to be prepared for these little concessions that we make in order to make sure that communication happens, right? So there's somebody who wants to ask a question, the regular ones, But here you find for once that there's somebody who's very silent is asking a question. Maybe it's not a very valid question, but this little kid has decided to open his or her mouth for the first time. So the best thing to do is look at the regular one and just kind of nod your head and say, wait, I'm coming back. They get the message, all right. You can't stop this. Just can you wait? Can I get, you don't do that. We don't do that, right? Nor do we ignore this other person who keeps questioning all the time. We just say, wait, I'll come back. So a lot of non-verbal communication happens on both sides of the table. We have to keep our eyes and even ears sometimes open, because movements do sometimes require that you catch the sound of the movement, right? They are sort of asking better questions. Questions drive learning. So here is a tip. Instead of saying, have you understood? Are there any questions? Instead of just doing that, because the usual answer is going to be yes, ma'am, no. Mostly no, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, understood. No, ma'am, no questions. For a feedback, and the feedback will ensure, remember, that communication happens. What did you think of that? Can someone explain this differently? How would this apply to your discipline? What evidence supports your answer? If any of you has undergone any of these sessions where they train you for these international English testing organizations, who conduct English tests, I'm sure they would have told you these are different ways of asking questions. So there's not just one way. But then see, if you follow these four, why do you think that is a way of encouraging countering your or supporting your, both ways? Can someone explain this differently? Again, countering. So we are actually allowing a democratic space in the classroom in order that students talk to us or among themselves. How would this apply to your discipline? Right? If it's a combined class, let's say, where you have students from technology, science, everyone is like you have in organizations that different faculties are there, commerce, science, humanities, maybe engineering, in your discipline. So then they become interested because they want to communicate how it appeals to them. And then what evidence supports your answer? So then you're asking for proof, for verification. So therefore, good questions create good thinking. And I think I'll have to hurry up because I've got this long list of slides that I want to share with you. So active listening is the most underrated teaching skill. And what is active listening? That is, listen without interrupting, and then acknowledge students' ideas, ask follow-up questions, clarify before correcting, and then encourage further discussions. I don't think I have to explain any of these. These were just markers. But what I would like to gloss over with this is, remember that word respect. All these indicate that you are in a position from where you will not at any point of time overlook that element of respect that you have for each other as student and teacher, right? Students participate more when they feel heard, so they should not feel left out. Effective communication to happen, it's a very sinking feeling, and especially in large classrooms, which we so therefore let's get to strategies now. I'll hurry up. Storytelling, the oldest communication strategy. So people remember stories more than information. As I've been telling you stories, you'll forget what I said. But if such a situation ever occurs, maybe that story will come back. And it does, usually does. Because we trust narrative. Narratives have a connection. We apply narratives to our lives. So stories help students understand, remember, connect, and finally apply. So you understand, you remember, connect all that as well. Apply later on. This is a kind of the fourth point on my slide. Apply, this one is for later. Hmm? So when we do daffodils, let's say, and those lines, remember, for often on my couch I lie, da da da, they flash upon that inward eye, that apply. They come back. That is very important. I'm sorry, I'm using literature. I don't know anything else. My friends from other disciplines, please bear with me. So, a good story can introduce, illustrate, or conclude a lesson. And recall. I should have put that in. I don't know why I missed it. Or maybe it didn't occur to me when I was making it. Recall mode. It puts you in recall mode, storytelling. That's a very interesting thing that we can do. You know, it creates a situation where things that have happened can keep coming back and they can be applied further. So a lot of my students will tell me later on, I've been applying these in class and they work. So even your cliched old stories have been used by students later on. And then, of course, the pause, the power of wait time. After asking a question, pause. Give them time to think. Let them sort of readjust. And then definitely you'll find that there is an increase in participation. The way they respond could change. Sometimes when you pause and you look at the students who don't talk at all in class, and you kind of raise an eyebrow and or nod at them, sometimes they do mumble and then you say, I can't hear you. Can you just, I keep doing that, increase the volume, don't go into the mute mode, increase. I keep doing that in class. By now, my students know when I say this, I can't hear. And they'll start giggling and they'll say, no, ma'am, this is what I meant. I said, precisely, can we all hear? I cannot hear your mind mumble. So can we all hear? And then they kind of, it breaks the ice a lot of times. So wait, and then maybe start, expecting feedback from them. And it does promote deeper thinking. The real serious ones will take the time to recalibrate their own procedures and the mental procedures or processes that are happening. And then they ask you questions back. So it's not wasted time. Not much, not very long, that they start kind of surfing on their phone or whatever, scrolling it. Just a bit of time, just a little bit of time, so that they have, it's an indication that you're waiting for them. That you're waiting for them to reformulate or formulate for that. This is another strategy, and I like this. Think, pair, share. Everyone thinks before anyone speaks. So the simple strategy for active participation is reflect individually, that's think, then discuss with one colleague. Now, in a classroom, that might become a big buzz, but just say do it quietly. Talk with someone who's next to you and then share. A lot of times, when you do the pairing, the real vocal ones will give the quieter ones a chance. Okay, you speak this time. It happens. Or we as teachers get a chance to tell them, can we have the other one, the one usually speaks, the other person, can we have the other person speak this time? We've already discussed. And then the quieter one keeps looking for validation at the vocal one, but then does open the mouth. And then if the quieter one is communicating with you, then the vocal one, if they had problems, would definitely communicate with you. So therefore, this think, pair, share, if it is possible, in a moderately large classroom, not a very large one where you can't hear or see people. I mean, if there are about 200 students, I know it's difficult, but in a moderately large classroom, in moderation, maybe we can do it once in a while. And if it becomes a practice and they relate this to you as a particular teacher who does this, sometimes even without your giving them this think, pair, share opportunity, they will raise their hand and then say, ma'am, we were talking, friends of ours, we were talking, and amongst us we thought this could be a question or a clarification that we had, or an idea that we want to share. So participation becomes less intimidating when students rehearse their first idea. So we give them a chance. So it's the next step after pause that we allow them to talk. Then we have discussion based learning from answer to dialogue. So if we talk about from answers to dialogue, so answer would have been one way. Dialogue obviously would be interaction. So moving beyond asking what is the correct answer, these are options that we have. Why do you think so? As we were talking about, can anyone offer another perspective? Do you agree or disagree, and why? After that think, pair, share has happened, not the first time, the second time, how would this apply in your field, or how would this apply if you uh, lived, say, 50 years ago? Let them imagine. How would it be different if you were in a small village, or if you're in a big city, or if you are in a roadside, something that is practical, or on the roadside, or if you're in a shop, at home. So if you change the field, by field I don't mean discipline, field of action, then you see whether your idea has actually sunk in, one, and two, more importantly, they can be applied in different fields. So if we are teaching, let's say, critical theory to students, or any theory for that matter, the theory is a kind of a key which will open various locks, right? So we will see, therefore, if the theory has been communicated, if they can apply it to different fields. And their responses become much richer then, because then they draw from their own experiences in life. Learning deepens when ideas are discussed and challenged and refined. Then, this part, the mind part, building psychological safety. Communication to happen, this is important. Students participate when they feel safe to ask questions, make mistakes, and I think I should have done it in bold black caps. Express different viewpoints, admit uncertainty, right? If they knew everything, they wouldn't be our students, they wouldn't be in a classroom. If we knew everything, we wouldn't be humans. So when we allow our students to forage for ideas, they realize that in new terrains, sometimes, if teachers are honest, even we forage for ideas. So if there's something very new, like for me, this entire digital thing is very new for me. So I keep asking them questions. How do I do that? How do I stop all these messages from coming in? And then later they tell me, ma'am, you keep forgetting, you're getting old. I told you that 2 days ago. I said, yes, I forgot. So now I remember that they also remember that I have asked them this question and I have forgotten. So I'll have to sort of, change my positioning and my understanding of things. So we allow them to ask questions. Mistakes. No, that's wrong. That's not the way of saying things. We know that. I mean, I'm sure we do that all the time. We never tell our students that's wrong. We always see as this is a possibility, but could we think of a little more, straight and a more applicable possibility? This could be a little niched or a little individual. Could we think of something which is a little more democratic? They get it. They get it that this was my whim and maybe we could think of it differently. And then express different viewpoints and admit that it is possible that things are not certain all the time. The teacher's response shapes the classroom culture. Mistakes are opportunities for learning, no reason for embarrassment. And for us, I don't know what I would do if I were a maths teacher. I'm sure there are my friends from the mathematics departments and the discipline, and they know if 2 and 2 somebody says it's not 4, they know how to handle this. Maybe it is not, maybe it is. In the social sciences and humanities especially, we have a much larger berth. So there is a way of diverting a discussion and bringing it back to point. But I'm sure each discipline has its ways and means of diverting and getting it back to point, so that the classroom environment is psychologically safe. They don't get intimidated, students. Once that happens, then it's a way down. So, right. Micro teaching activity. So you have communication in practice. So let's get to the practical stuff. Think about a situation like this in a classroom. It's a 10-minute activity. If again a moderately large classroom, we can't think in terms of very large classrooms. I haven't found a way of that's what I admit. But moderately large, the kind of classroom that we have. One difficult concept from our relevant disciplines, then have a 3-minute explanation using at least 3 communication strategies that we have: storytelling, wait time, better question, active listening, being paired. And then wait, ready to share your approach. So give them the time and then ask them. See how we operate, right? So you break it down to smaller sections and then put them all together back again. Instead of having a one-way communication happens, because then if you break them down into little, let's say, how do I say, into little chunks, certain people would have thought at different stages of that entire process. I hope I'm getting across. So there is, let's say, a 1 inch or sorry, a 1 foot long idea. So it's not necessary that the students understand that 1 foot completely. Certain students will address the first 3 inches. Certain students will address the next 2 inches. Some will address the last ones. Some of them will combine the last and the middle and then try and understand the first, right? So if we take them to little bits here, like, 3-minute explanation, and then use these strategies and then put them back together. If we have the time, especially when the ideas are complex, then we kind of say, look, what have we missed out? And it's never what have you missed out. It's not, or never second person. It's always first person plural. What have we missed out? That helps. That definitely, I've been doing this, helps, especially in a new situation, a new set of students who don't know you, or a new concept. Then we kind of put it all down, if possible, on a blackboard, or even otherwise, if they have it, then read it out to them. This is what you've said. This is what you've said. This is what we have thought. And this is the area that we have missed out. We have missed out. Right? And we wait, that wait time. And if nothing comes, maybe just give them an anecdote that we have. And definitely something is going to transpire. It's going to come back. And the way they would have understood it, you evaluate and see if their understanding fits into the mold of the theory that we are trying to communicate with them, or make little adjustments. So it's not something that, you're kind of bombarding them with, but it's something where they also participate and they add their understanding to this entire structuring of that theory, which is otherwise abstract, or of the concept, which is otherwise abstract. So there is a micro teaching activity, right? I'm only halfway through. Right. Then you have engaging every voice, inclusive communication. Not my voice. I'm the only one who talks. Everyone. So the voice would be, every student deserves the opportunity to participate. Some of them won't, but we can always, sort of encourage them as much as we can within the time that we have. Inclusive communication means learning students' names. We call them by names as much as possible. It's surprising that, the way they respond when you call them by names. It gives them visibility. Not just students, everyone. It gives them visibility. So in a world like this, where we are all lost, and now all this digitization and everything else, and because we're all alien here. It's not a small village and small locality where everybody knew everybody by name. In a classroom where there are 200, if we can call a few people by name and then, of course, increase that number, maybe get to 50% of the class, would be wonderful. The way they engage with the proceedings, it's absolutely mind-boggling. And then we know that it's nothing new that I'm saying. Encouraging diverse viewpoints, and if it does not fit into the mold of things that we are saying, we say, uh, can we hold on to that for a while and then maybe use it differently? Don't say, no, no, it's of no use. Just say, maybe you can use it differently, but keep it with yourself for the moment. We'll use it when the time comes. They don't feel left out. Using accessible language, no jargon. And here, this accessible language, sometimes as little as possible, but sometimes maybe we have to use other languages or other forms of communication. So accessible language does not just mean verbal language, also means non-verbal language. Respecting different learning styles, each of them have to learn differently, inviting participation in everyone. Inclusion begins with communication. So once we start communicating with each other, they feel that they're included, and then the communication begins again. So it's like a pendulum. You have communication to inclusion, inclusion back to communication, and it happens. So we have to keep that pendulum ticking, or operating, the clock ticking. Uh, my clock is also ticking. Uh, anyway, so inclusion begins with communication. I'll move on. Uh, and then giving, this is the next stage, giving constructive feedback. Right? Effective feedback is timely, specific, respectful, actionable. Actionable. Respectful, we've talked about that enough. Actionable. That can actually be put into action. Focus on improving the work, not judging the person. Right? So respectful, don't judge the person, but putting it into work, that's something that can be worked on. Not feedback which is like out of the way. There's no point doing that. Feedback should guide learning, not discourage it. So even if the person is not in tune with the message that was being communicated in that particular session of the classroom, always tell them that we can always come back to it. Maybe this time we'll think about it differently, but that the time for that particular interpretation which does not fit in here will come, and we'll go back to it. It keeps them happy, it keeps them interested, and it does not discourage them. So that is something that, that respect and keeps coming back. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough. And remember, they are young adults. So especially when we are talking about higher education, they're all young adults. And they have an opinion about themselves and the world, vis-a-vis the world, themselves vis-a-vis the world. We cannot in any way negatively affect that with our um, feedback. Here, using humor and enthusiasm wisely. And humor is not making fun. Yeah, if we can make fun, we can only make fun of ourselves. So turn all the humor towards yourself. That helps. Never at our students, never. Right? Or we can do it in a collective, where here is a group of whatever, monkeys or something like that, but never individuals. And we know that. I mean, it's nothing new that I'm saying. A positive classroom atmosphere environment encourages engagement. Appropriate humor can reduce anxiety. Just crack a slight joke, build rapport, sustain attention, make learning memorable. They'll remember the joke. But please, the butt of the joke is always the self, never anybody else on the other side of the table. Right? Because they are operating under tremendous peer pressure, and they will go back into their cocoons. If we have been able to pull them out a little bit so that there is effective communication, they'll go back forever. So we can't risk that. Humor should never embarrass or exclude. Students remember how learning felt. Right? So they should not have instances where they will tell their siblings, younger siblings or friends or children later on, that they were made fun of in a class. That is a very sad thing to have happened. The butt of the joke is always the self. And then the plus point is, the bonus is, the students start thinking if the teacher can make fun of himself or herself and can be as stupid, we do stand a chance, and we won't be, sort of belittled or insulted. That's the bonus. They open up a lot more if we can do that. Right. Encouraging the quieter students. A class of 60 students, only 4 students participate regularly, the others remain silent. Attendance is good, assessment scores decline. Why? What has happened? What could have happened? Where the class has remained very, very quiet. So, again, instead of just asking questions like, have you understood? Wait time, make them into small groups, right? The quieter ones. And then maybe ask the quieter ones, because we already know by then the quieter ones, what do you think? What does, or rather, instead of saying what do you think, which they might think as in singular, what does your group think? Then the onus is not on them. It's like what the group thinks. So they're only representing a group. So they can keep going back and cross-checking with the other members of the group, and they will start opening up. The you word, sometimes, which I have used here again, is a very tricky word, because the student takes it as a singular rather than a plural. So if we say the group, what does your group think? Then there's validation. Okay, it's like a group activity rather than. The other thing that you can do is have a box and say, if you have questions and you feel shy for the first time today, and then we're going to make the boxes smaller. I put a box. You can leave your question here. I'll answer it. If it's anonymous, then maybe after a little while later, can you put your name so that we can talk about it? I will not open it here. Then once they start opening up, you won't need the box anymore. As a very young teacher, I was scared because I was doing the wrong thing. I tried doing that in the compulsory English class, because there were students from all disciplines. And the questions came, some in words, some in sentences, wrong sentences, whatever. I opened each of them and I said, whatever sense I make of this, I will. And there were no names, so there was no danger of being, sort of made fun of or anything. So one class went that way. And then I said, look, if I keep doing this every day, I will not be able to finish the syllabus. So can we start talking? If it's very, very difficult, then maybe I'll make a smaller box. But they did. At least some of them did, not all, of course, but some of them did, right? When students ask difficult questions, I'm sure you've had a session about this, a difficult classroom situation. When students ask difficult questions, challenging questions are opportunities, not threats, right? The first rule. Difficult questions, the unease should not be reflected on a teacher's face. You start fidgeting, we start, sort of knitting our eyebrows, we start expressing our anger, dissatisfaction, and the whole bubble just bursts. So listen carefully. As you listen, you're also working in your mind. Then say, have I got this question right? So clarify the question. Then let me think about it. Think before responding. And then after a while, you realize you don't know, and say, beyond this, I don't know. So I started straight away by answering difficult questions. I know nothing about this digital thing, but I'm learning. So I will come back with it. And then say, can we get together and do something about it? I don't know. Maybe it does. They'll open up their phones, tabs, whatever. Ma'am, this is what I have. Sir, this is what I have. Put it together. Right? It will not reduce the respect that they have for you ever. If you say, I don't know, but I'll find out. They'll help you learn. They do. All our students do. It's not that they don't know anything. So this is as far as I know. Beyond this, I'll have to find out. So if you're honest, credibility comes from honesty. And it's not possible for us to know everything. Even if you're very well prepared, there might be an angle. Like I went through the slides, I realized I hadn't put in something else. I should have. But there I am. And I accepted that I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. So that is a negative point. But the point is, I realize that there is a gap in the way I have understood, and I'm learning with you. It makes students very, very comfortable that yes, my teacher is also there with me, and because they also have information. It's not something that I have all the books and all the libraries and they have nothing. So the it's not like sort of high end and low end or anything like that. It's kind of equitably distributed, the information. It's only the interpretation and the engaging that comes differently from the teacher sometimes, more often than not, which we take our students in with us. Okay, managing classroom discussions respectfully. So healthy discussions require respectful disagreement. All of us can't say, yes, we all agree, then there is no classroom. Right? We're not making clones. Evidence-based reasoning. So in the sciences, the way we give evidence will be different from the way we give it in the humanities and social sciences, performing arts. It will all be different means, but we can all make this relevant to our own disciplines. Equal opportunity to speak, active listening, shared focus on learning. Now, evidence-based learning, fine. Equal opportunity to speak both ways. Active listening. Now, active listening is just not one-sided again. It's both ways, right? And we check if they're listening by asking these, can we do this differently? So that we know that how would they be different if they did not hear what you have said? And then shared focus on learning. So just as you are learning, we are learning too. So maybe this is what I learned just now as I am talking. Something struck me. I said, well, it didn't strike me earlier. This is something that I just thank you for the idea that you gave. Yeah, we could think about it this way. This is a good way of doing things. So disagreement need not become conflict in every classroom. Remember, we have students who are extremely invested and intelligent, students who are very intelligent but not invested, students who are invested but not intelligent, and then neither. So the class, it's never a kind of a straight line graph. It's going to go up and down, up and down. So there are moments when we will have to keep making these adjustments. Sometimes they are technical, sometimes they are ideational. So managing a classroom discussion is an art or a craft that we have to pick up, and communication is where is something that gets affected in these situations. The only way of checking whether communication has happened is trying to get feedbacks in course of that particular session, and they happen as much as we can, because we are all time tied and time bound, and just as I am overstepping my time. But then we can always seek confirmation in our own ways, small little ways. Turning mistakes into learning opportunities, right? And this is, I think, one of the best proofs of the fact that communication have happened. Instead of asking who got this wrong, ask what can we learn from this answer? Why might someone think this? How can we improve? Most importantly, improve this response. Mistakes are data for learning. So instead of calling it a mistake, we just use it as an opportunity so that we can improve our learning. Students feel safe with such people who say, okay, we'll rest this for a while. Maybe think about how you can improve this, not say this is not right, or do it differently maybe, so that this can fit into the larger design. We have a big design, and so that we can fit all these little pieces into the design. So it's like participatory response, and then therefore communication can happen. Here, so communicating, this is a case study of communicating through a challenging classroom situation, right? This one, again, I've got this back. 60 students, 4 students participate regularly. I keep going back to this.
Others remain silent. Attendance is good. Assessment scores are declining. What do we do? So we arrange our, we kind of go back to our communication barriers, what was affecting it, and then maybe also question why did communication not happen? Did we take certain things for granted? And that is why the assessment shows such low scores. And then what other strategies that we had not used among the ones that we have been discussing, we had not used earlier, could have been used here. So in each stage of any performance, any class, any program, this is a slide, or a slide that should, should remain with us forever in our minds, a piece of writing that remains with us, that we keep re-evaluating at regular intervals. Because if we've gone ahead too far and then certain people have been left behind, they might find it very difficult to catch up, and unfortunately we might not have the time to wait for them. Some ideal examples, if we can get: great teachers are great communicators. Across discipline, memorable teachers share common qualities, whatever discipline, right? Think about some of the great teachers that we have. The first thing that comes to mind is Socrates and his disciples. Talk about philosophers, scientists, Carl Sagan, astronomer, scientist, Rabindra Thakur,
APJ Abdul Kalam.
yes, I was waiting for that. I really was. Among the most recent, think about somebody from the fine arts, Birju Maharaj. So they have all been able to communicate. Say, or when we think about, let's say, or think about, if you see these reality shows, Sonu Nigam, when he's judging in these reality shows, a lot of it is performance, but a lot of it is also very, very insightful comments, right?
Ma'am,
In
Kaushiki
different,
Chakraborty as well.
some of my very senior teachers, I sat in a class where Professor Shukanta Chaudhary was my teacher. He taught us Shakespeare. He taught it well, but he taught us Blake. He taught that very well. He also taught us in a refresher course Australian literature. He also taught that well. So now these, for people who are from the humanities, would want different sections of literary studies. Great teachers, great communicators. So the whole purpose was that he could communicate to us what he was saying, even though they were very different chunks of ideas, let's say. So across discipline, memorable teachers share common qualities. Explain complex ideas simply. Like the complexity, and so the word complex and complicated are different things. So instead of explaining complex ideas simply, if you're going to make it complicated, the communication will not happen. And a very good strategy would be using anecdotes. Use anecdotes, let them get in experiences, map that onto the idea, and then make adjustments. It stays with them. Connect theory with life, as I was saying. Inspire curiosity. Ask questions. What would you think? How would you do that? Encourage questions. Again, an extension. Making learning memorable. How do we make learning memorable? It's not just the message. It's not just the what. It's also the how of the learning. That makes it memorable. Students may forget facts, but they remember how knowledge was made meaningful. I should have put that how in block caps. See, I'm learning. So this helps when you make slides and you make mistakes. That how should have been not just the what, the how should have been large block caps. How knowledge was made meaningful to them, right? Instead of kind of bringing down a ton of bricks on their heads, little children, young adults, if we kind of pace it well, open it up first, and then put it back in place, like children love to do, take things back, break them apart and put them back. If we are able to put them back in place, then we know communication has happened. All great teachers do that. Learning from great communicators. Thank you for the names. Carl Sagan, that series called Cosmos. I don't know how many of you have seen. I have seen as a young learner about space research. And he had this spaceship, imaginary spaceship called the Dandelion. That kind of, when you blow it, floats in the wind. Richard Feynman made physics available to you. Get Richard Feynman's lectures. All our science students here who are teachers of science will know this. You get them for people like us to read his lectures. Make some. So you have making difficult ideas simple. That's one way. Learning through dialogue and freedom. Inspiring to humility and vision. And then connect science with wonder, imagination. Right? And imagination is not actually where mind floats off somewhere else. Imagination, for those who have read some philosophy, will know imagination is constructive. It puts ideas together. It relates to a background. It comes from a solid formation of ideas that we've had. So it's not something that kind of takes you away into fantasy. Imagination is constructive. It is a way of putting ideas together. Otherwise, we wouldn't have space technology at all if we had no imagination. Think about all the epics that we talk about. The Brahmastra, and think this is all about remote control. Right? All our fairy tales. Remember Sindbad on his flying carpet, or whatever, or Aladdin and his lamp, and this is imagination, but we're also talking in terms of relating it to everyday world experiences, how science developed. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't have all this. So it's not just novels and plays and poetry. It's also science. So imagination plays a very, very important role. Philosophy, different disciplines, but one principle, meaningful communication. So that is the reason why we resort to different means in different disciplines so that we reach meaningful communication. The universal language of storytelling, very, very useful means, strategy for communication. How do they help students? Stories help students to understand, remember, and then relate and apply. Right? They understand, they remember, they relate, and of course they apply. And then let's think about all the disciplines that we have. Science, history, medicine, engineering. We all have our stories. Commerce, literature. Think about all the good teachers that you had. And some point or the other in their entire that part of their life when they imparted knowledge to you particularly, to your batch and your friends, they would have told you stories which you collected. You have used them now with your own students. Right? Because these important facts will give you information, and the stories will give them a body, will make them visible, will keep them with you forever. Just like the other day I was telling you, one of my students said, I've come and used your acne story. The same story that probably the other day I was seeing, I think on YouTube or something, said there was this thing about communication. So parents don't stay with us, children go away, friends go away, right? So, but if you put your head together, life partners don't seem to go away. But the moment you do it, they seem to something of this sort. So like they were actually putting a body into an idea about what a conjugal relationship, something like that would be like. So I said, put your head down, and then you can't move this very far apart. You can move all these, but not if this is a conjugal relationship. Of course, see, this is constructed. You can do all these, but when you bend these two fingers down, you can't remove this. That is how my hand is structured. So you're actually making a story out of a scientific fact, right? And using it in a classroom. So if I'm going to teach, say, Paradise Lost, book 9, which I do, that's why I'm using it. I could use this for Adam and Eve, put this down and say they wouldn't be able to go away. That was a structure. I was structuring him and they would remember it because this is so much out of the text and yet so relevant to it. So you could use these universal storytelling as it's a language. It's a universal language of communication. And then the teacher is an architect of curiosity, right? So you create curiosity, make people curious, ask question. The best classroom encourage student to ask why, good enough, what if, and then of course it was different, then how, and then could there be a better. So why, how, what if, maybe I could change the order here if it was different, and could it be a better one. So you first understand, diagnose, and then you see the prognosis, what is the outcome, how it would be, and then you see how it would be different in the plan for treatment, and then could we do it differently. So you find an alternative. Teachers do not simply answer questions, they cultivate curiosity because education begins with wonder. I like this. If you have a social media page or whatever you call it, I don't know, what is it called? A profile. This is a nice one, and it's not pontificating, it's not intimidating, it's nice. I liked it, so I put it here. I had to use this, so I put it here. Now, and here I am going to take a back seat because my friends on the other side of the screen know much more than I do. Communication beyond the classroom, just like what we are doing now, right? A virtual classroom. Today, teaching extends beyond face-to-face interaction. So you have email, the LMS. My son had in his school the LMS, WhatsApp. I have this one. There is no WhatsApp. Online classes or a meeting that we have, and shared digital resources. So communication can happen in very many ways. So how do we make these interesting ways of engaging in communication? What we need to have is make sure that when we communicate beyond the classroom, when there are no physical presences, there is clarity in what we say. There is courtesy, because written messages should not make people think, which we could do with our face, with our body gestures, which we cannot make when it is on the digital platform. It is courteous, it is consistent, so that there is no confusion. They don't come in waves, but they come together, and it is accessible. So if we go beyond the classroom for communication, then we have to remember that it is clear, it is courteous, it is consistent, and it is accessible all the time, right? Otherwise, communication would not have happened, because if there is a glitch anywhere, it might retard, just maybe not stop, but retard communication, or might not lead to the desired effect. Therefore, communication will not complete the cycle. Remember, which was not a cycle in my slide, but arrows, because I didn't know how to do a cycle. So it would not come into feedback stage, and communication would not happen. So we have to remember these 4 features. Then, writing clearly in the digital age. So a good digital communication, again, is clear, as I said, concise, courteous, and consistent. Clear, all C's. Concise, it doesn't go away all over the place. Again, courtesy, because we don't know how people would respond if we don't see them. And consistent, doesn't go back and forth. And then the cross check before sending a message. Ask these questions: is it clear? Is it complete? Could it be misunderstood so that we make adjustments? Because clarity would reduce confusion, and if there is no confusion and it is clear, communication would happen. Your domain, not mine. Artificial intelligence, a partner, not a replacement. That's not it what it is. We all participate in this. It can be used as a tool. I can't say it's your domain, not mine. Right? We all use artificial intelligence to a greater or lesser degree. But the point is that it should be seen as a friend, as a companion, not as a replacement, the kind of scare that we are getting. Because ultimately, it is only a tool. What we as human beings do in this system of communication, especially in the academia, cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence. Ask your students, they'll tell you. Initially say, ma'am, don't come to class, let's do it online or whatever it is. But then they realize always that there was something that I wanted to ask. Maybe I'll do it later. It's not because they don't want to ask you then. It's because probably they realize that there could have been a better medium of doing it, because online there's a limit to which you can take the emotional aspect of it. And if it is especially artificial intelligence, there is hardly, I don't know if there is any, not that I know of, any emotional aspect to it. I mean, I can always use the language, but that felt emotional aspect, that psychological effect that you have in a physical classroom where communication is done differently, cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence. So it can help teachers generate ideas, and like we do question papers. I mean, we shouldn't do question papers by artificial intelligence, but whatever, because question papers come out of what is transpired in class, not what we think should be a question. Prepare quizzes, simplify explanations, improve language, and teachers, but then still provide, yeah, and we're not completely useless still. Judgment, experience, empathy, 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 empathy. I cannot overemphasize this. Ethical guidance and the human connection. So empathy and the human connection. The others, yes, but these two, of course, yes. So technology supports teaching, but teachers inspired learning. Remember APJ? Remember what he had said? Inspired learning, inspired teaching, inspiration, inspiration. That's why you named him. That's why you named him. Not because he was the president, not because he's the missile man, but because he's a teacher. Somebody who sat on the floor with the students, on the steps. If you see some of his videos, he sits on the steps with the students and talks to them. So inspired teaching, empathy, and the human connection. Slowly winding up. Another 5 minutes and I'll be through. 5 digital practices that improve student engagement, because we have to do the digital mode now. Simple change can make a big difference. Regular intervals, weekly announcement, feedback videos or voice notes, polls and quizzes, discussion forums, clear response time expectations. So like we have a session after this, a time where we can talk about this. So technology is most effective when it strengthens communication, not when it complicates it. So we use technology as a tool to help, not to hinder, not to complicate. So every now and then, as much as possible, we go back and sort of do a feedback session. So we get to see how it is progressing, in which direction is it being waylaid, are there gaps. So if we resort to digital platforms for student engagement, we have to have feedback sessions. So the 10 principles of engaging communication. So I think these are the questions that we will carry with us. Before every class, ask yourself, am I clear? Am I listening? I. Am I encouraging participation? Am I asking thoughtful questions? Am I allowing students to think, giving them time to think? Am I connecting ideas with life? Am I creating psychological safety? So this is a kind of a putting together whatever we've been talking about so far into 10 questions. Am I giving constructive feedback? Am I using technology meaningfully? Am I inspiring curiosity? Right? So this more or less is the crux of what I've been trying to say. So these are the questions maybe which will help us communicate better. Communication is not what we say, rather what we get as feedback, what students experience. So these will probably help us evaluate these questions, whether communication has happened at all or not. Right. We carry these sentences with us. The reflection activity. I think we need to reflect. Spoken a lot, heard a lot. I realized today that. What did we realize? Maybe this can come up as your feedback when you give it to the program. I was surprised by from tomorrow onwards, from tomorrow and onwards, that is, onwards, I will, what will I do? What are the changes or what are the adjustments? I wouldn't say changes. We're already teaching, all of us, so not changes much really, but adjustments that we will make. And this is my action plan. First this week, extend it to this semester, and then extend it to 2 semesters, or if you have the year, academic year. I'm still old school, so I have my academic year. I should have said academic session, but I still stuck to year. Small, consistent changes for creating lasting improvement so that communication is not hampered. And maybe the kind of classroom, this is wishful thinking. I mean, we would like to do that. Teacher-centered, right? And learner-centered. So if you have a lecturer, you have a facilitator, if it is learner-centered. If you have a monologue in a teacher-centered classroom, you have a dialogue, passive listening and active participation. Not active listening alone, but participation. Fear of mistakes. But more importantly, if it's learner-centered, learning from mistakes. And then information, understanding / communication. I should have put that as well. So our goal is not simply to complete the syllabus, which it is, but not the only goal. It is to cultivate thoughtful, confident, lifelong learners who will again, later on, become teachers. Thank you very much and have a good day.
What a joy and pleasure it was to learn from you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Like right from understanding and tackling modern classroom scenarios to plunging and ruminating the down memory lanes of literature classes to knocking into the avenues and doors of modern tools and technology. It was such a beautiful experience, ma'am. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
Thank
enriching us so beautifully with such fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
But you also need a break because you have a next session. So if you have questions, I would like to
Yes,
take them
ma'am.
on.
I request the audiences to kindly put forth their questions, if any.
Ma'am, I have a question. Can I
Yeah,
ask a
please,
question?
please.
Uh, yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask you about when you had encouraged teachers to ask different questions about not only what is your answer, but how do you think differently and how can you say the answer with evidence. So, how can we encourage students to give evidence-based answers?
No, not in the sense of evidence. Maybe I worded it wrong. See, communication did not happen. By evidence, I don't mean give proof. It's from your own experience. So if I said no, roses are not red, so what would I say? That okay, I've seen red roses, but I've also seen white roses. That is an evidence. I've also seen pink ones. So you can't kind of club all these roses to say they are red. So rose and red don't go all the time. So if I said think about flowers, right? So you say jasmines are white, roses are red, and say no ma'am, roses are not red only, they are also pink and orange and whatever party colored and whatever else. That is the student's evidence. So
Right.
they heard the first part of my sentence, which is jasmine is white and roses are red. right? So they were not countering me, they were only adding. So I can't tell them, okay, keep quiet, we'll talk about other kinds of roses. That's not it, because what we wanted is to check whether they heard the first part of my sentence, the jasmines are white. That was a statement. And to establish that, I had said roses are red, right? So, or if I said hibiscus is red, now they'll say no, they are pink also, and they're orange, and they're whatever other colors. So it's a way of, as you grow older, like me, see all the gray hair. So you will realize that while you are teaching, you're also evaluating not only them, you're also evaluating yourself.
Yeah,
Because
right.
because you'll be say, I for instance, if I teach Shakespeare, I'm an English teacher, and I've been teaching Shakespeare for donkey's years, as you know, 30 years. Now it's become like, it's become like what, like putty in my hand. But it is not so. I should realize that it is not putty in my hand. Every student batch is different, every classroom is different, every session is different. And so when I've said something and taken it for granted, just because I'm on this side of the desk, it doesn't give me the right. And my students will be my best
Reviewers.
reviewers, evaluators. They evaluate,
Evaluators, right.
not just review. They evaluate you all the time. So all those feedback forms that we fill in for our promotions and everything else fall flat before the students' feedback. Get that, and you know
True.
what good a teacher you are.
Absolutely.
Because they change every time. Are you changing? Are you updating? Not reading 10 books. See, the whole idea is, and I'm going to share the secret with you because you're my colleagues. I wouldn't if you're on the other, sort of the other side of a desk in a different classroom. The thing is that when we are talking about checking ourselves, right? You take on this practice as you go along. You evaluate yourself every time you have made a statement, because the moment you see their faces, you know that it is not going down well. And it's not, and this is why we don't fall asleep and take it like, get complacent, because every batch and every day in the same batch will be a different day. So as you grow older, as you face more classes, it becomes clearer to you. I mean, it's not such a big deal. So
Thank you, ma'am.
welcome. And any more questions, just you have a Dropbox like my big box, drop it there, and then do we have participants here from other states?
Yes, ma'am, we do have.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
maybe you could share how, if not how, if there are any regional differences that you have to handle. Maybe that will enrich our understanding of things across the country. I mean, this is the advantage of having a non physical classroom.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
So I'm from Delhi, and adding to what you've said, first of all, thank you so much for this amazing session. This session by far has been the best session, and you have definitely been patient.
No, I have large classes. What do you do, man?
I do guest lectures. So
Where and what discipline?
in communication, professional education.
Oh, you are the expert, and here I was lecturing you. What irony! Don't tell me that.
I tell you what, there is always, and if you keep your mind open, you always learn, right? And there are things that I might think, and there are things that you're telling, and there is always experience added to it. So adding that, I wanted to have some insights on the practice that I do. For example, if I am teaching a topic which is around 30 pages from the college books, right? So I give my students, 10 days. If it's a 30-page catalog, so I tell them, you have 7 days to ask me questions based on this and the extra research you do. So if you're coming and telling me that you have an AI-based answers, great. Let's even have a conversation. On the 7th day, we'll have an open meet kind of, online, and discuss and get to the extremes of everything that you're bringing on the table. So this way everyone learns and evolves, right? And probably even I'll get to learn from you guys.
Absolutely.
Right. So is there is this strategy okay? I mean, like, because this is what I follow.
Yes, because see, I mean, it's not possible for us, Meher, to know everything. So they would have read things we wouldn't have read. And then this age gap is a very tricky thing.
because even if they are like 10 years younger to us, it's a different generation. They think of it very differently. So, and then as we go on, the batches that come become younger and younger and younger. So I like, these are stopgap, so the 10-year younger batch would have told me to prepare for the 20-year younger batch that is going to come. So as you are gathering things, you're also kind of adjusting your own module of communication. So it's a very good, and then they get time for it, so they're not rushed. You are not rushed. And when you kind of put it all on the table, as you said, there are those quieter ones who would have wanted to ask but had problems, but they had their problems sorted out because you had kind of put them all in a bag. Right. So if that is how it is, then they kind of get a chance to communicate.
Yeah, because you asked, no, how is it different? So I say Delhi kids are a little more everything. Every time you speak up something, they come up with the phone and they say, "Acha, ye bhi hai, ma'am, this is there." So I tell them, wow, what did you learn out of it? Because if I say, this is not covered in the topic, and a lot of things, because kids can ask ridiculous questions at times also. And it is never a great idea to put yourself on a spot. So I always do, wow, this is something I'm learning. So you're going to teach me something today. I bring them on the table. Like, because somebody's bringing, please, Aajao, mujhe bhi batao. I want to learn from you. So that's how at times when I say, okay, this is a good topic. Otherwise, if a topic is completely out of the zone, and obviously school has a curriculum, every college has a curriculum to fill in, right?
Yes.
So I put that, okay, we have a week's time to talk about this and the other topics. And this way, I've also realized the kids that don't speak up, right, in these sessions, it's great for them to actually put their questions in whatever format they like.
Yes.
Right? So there's always an email, there's always a WhatsApp, like you have an option to send questions.
Yes.
And I don't name them who's asking this question.
And so, no, that's good. That we never do. And sometimes, people don't want to make eye contact at all.
Yeah.
But they're absolutely furiously paced when it comes to the phone. Forever talking on the phone, but they don't want to talk to you in person.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something I don't know how to handle this, but I keep telling them, like, I call them the tuntuna. So don't use the tuntuna so much. Because it keeps ringing in the class. I said, don't use it so much. I mean, it's okay. I'm not that bad looking. No, ma'am, we didn't mean that. It's just put it away.
Yeah.
And then I say, okay, fish it out. Look this up for me. I don't know what answer to give you. They do that. Then 30 people will tell me 30 different things. I say, see, how am I going to kind of, sieve all that?
Right.
So this is very relevant. I'm not saying this is not important, but this is not relevant right now.
Right.
So for that cycle which I do as a flow chart to happen, this is relevant. The rest we will wait when we need it. So that's how
you said that the relevant are the out of the context part we discuss on those days that I decide.
Exactly.
So, because it is also important, and and the topic that we are talking about is by default so important when it comes to professional life and career building. These aspects.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of
Right. So, and
things we catch up with. Thank you, Mer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I thank all the participants and ma'am also. And I think we have few questions. We will forward them to ma'am in due course of time. And we'll share ma'am's mail ID to all the participants in the chat box or in the WhatsApp group that we have created. Ma'am, so we are ending the session.
Thank you.
We also have one more session in the afternoon.
Yeah, sure. I know. Taken too much time. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. And it was such a pleasure and such a joy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
And
Bye. And have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Bye.
One main takeaway from your session, which I really liked, and that was facts inform and stories transform. So I'm going to incorporate that in my class.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you, ma'am.
if you're going to teach humanities, Meenakshi, you can't get away but tell stories. So that's
True,
the only thing
ma'am.
I can do. Bye. Take care. See you soon. Bye.
bye, ma'am.
Bye.